Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed when the sun shone down on the Garden of Eden.
Don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia, Solartopia, Solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia all over God's green world?
Well, we bit that apple and the garden was lost, and so we had to work to pay the cost. And so we went digging into the ground and started to burn many things we found. But
don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia?
Started to burn too many things we found. That's the wonderful Dara Williams singing with Pete Seeger, the legend, and David Burns, the Solartopia song. David wrote the words, Pete wrote the music. Dara provided the brilliant singing, and I sort of hung out and watched everything. I did write the word Solartopia, and that's our show, the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness Show. We are back for another hour in the wake of the incredibly boring Mueller hearings and the incredibly disheartening corporate Democrats. You know, when I look at Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, I see Donald Trump in the White House for life. These people are completely inept and worthless and spineless, and they're the reason Donald Trump is in the White House, and that's what we're going to talk about. Today we have the truly great LILA Garrett. We are honored by her presence. LILA, are you with us?
Hi.
Hey.
I love
How are you?
It's fun, really fun, empowering.
Yeah. Well, you are an inspiration. You are the hostess of the Connect the Dots show forever on KPFK Los Angeles, Pacifica, one of the great commentators of our time. And it's an honor to have you on the show, and I know you've got some strong feelings about Mr. Mueller, and we're going to also talk about war as a national pastime and what we're going to do to get out of this incredible mess that we're in. We also seem to have had a clone of Donald Trump turn up in England. Every time I see that guy, Boris Yeltsin or Johnson or whatever his name is, I do a double take. I mean, you know, it's like, hello, it's kind of like Wayne's World or something, you know?
Well, it's like
and
Trump said.
What's that?
He's a British me.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. You know, you have to wonder about our species. Is this the best we can do? I mean, come on. And we're joined by Joe DEMARE. Joe, you with us?
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm here.
I'm with
And I would describe myself as
it seems to be
hopefully adequate,
Of course,
Joe
it's
DEMARE.
not the best we can do, but it seems to be something that we continually do, whether it's the best or whether it's not. And the thing that's so disturbing about what's happening now is the way they're making truths up. For example, you know, first of all, Mueller's testimony was so stumbling that you almost felt sorry for him, didn't you?
Yes. I mean, he's obviously, he is seriously
he left
aged.
no doubt that Trump was guilty of making a deal with Russia to let them help him win the election. And is this a crime? Yes, it is a crime. No one's questioning that. When you run for president, you're not allowed to take money or aid from foreign countries to help you get elected. Nobody denies that. And that is exactly what Trump did. He and his pal Putin vilified Hillary Clinton. The American press had a ball with that. And it was a factor in Trump's winning. But the thing is, it wasn't the major factor. And that's what I think we really have to be talking about. Hillary got 3 million more popular votes, as it happened, than Trump did. You remember that, don't you, Harvey?
I do.
If we were doing one person, one vote, Trump would not only have lost, he would have lost big. But because of the obsolete system of our electoral college, which takes the popular vote and turns it on its head based on a bunch of obsolete population factors that applied 100 years ago, the popular vote has very little relevance today. Trump won, even though he lost. And until we get rid of that ridiculous system of the Electoral College, we stand a very good chance of not getting a president who was, in fact, voted by the majority of the people. It's supposed to be one person, one vote, right? Well,
yes, in certain worlds.
Well, the Republicans won't let that happen. So history will keep repeating itself for the foreseeable future, in my opinion.
Well, I want to introduce with you Lila. That's Lila Garrett, our host from the Connect the Dots show and one of our great commentators, Joe DEMARE. Joe, you're with us, right?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can, and you're speaking from Bowling Green, Ohio. Is that right?
That's correct. And
later in the show, we're going to be talking about this horrendous bailout that the Ohio legislature has passed for the nuclear power plants in Ohio. It's an utter catastrophe, but it does appear there may be attempts to overturn it with a referendum. And Joe, we're going to be talking about that. And you're welcome to jump in our conversation here about Mueller and the Trump dictatorship and the destruction of what's left of American democracy and even America as a republic. Lila, let's go back to you. You were never a fan of the Mueller or his report. What do you think? And now that you've seen him,
well, they refer to him as a man of dignity, a person of importance. We should be proud of him. I don't share that feeling. I mean, he was in the military and very proud of that. And as you know, I feel that the fact that we have a permanent war economy is at the very nub of our problem. I do not believe in a permanent war economy, and I do not believe in a permanent enemy to help feed that permanent war economy so we can make sure that we can always have a war somewhere. So, and Mueller is a big fan of the military. In addition, he is a Republican. And in addition to that, he was not only was in the Vietnam War, but he also was a big supporter of the theory of weapons of mass destruction. So Mueller is not my favorite person. But, he did nail Trump in this way. He said Trump had broken the law by working with Putin to vilify Hillary. He did admit that. But he kept saying that a sitting president cannot be indicted. Now, I really think it's important that our listeners understand that they're making that up. Let me repeat it, that a sitting president cannot be indicted while he's in office. Everybody seemed to nod and assent and move on. Well, I say not so fast. There is no such law. It's not in the Constitution. There's no such law on the books anywhere. There's no such vote that's ever been taken. The rule was described by one of the pundits as the will of the Justice Division. That's a quote. Since when is the will of the Justice Division an automatic law? The rule that Robert Barr, the bought-off Attorney General, kissed into his job by Trump, is suddenly the law? I mean, he is Trump's lackey, and he made a rule that no sitting president can be indicted no matter what he's done. Well, that law simply means nothing. No wonder Trump once bragged that he can walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot someone in the head and get away with it. If Robert Barr is the Attorney General, he sure can. He's just admitted, who told Congress to lump it if they didn't like his deciding what the laws are in the United States. So, what's your opinion of him?
Can I jump in for a second?
Yes, Joe DEMARE from Bowling Green, Ohio. Jump in. And we are expecting, by the way, that Robert Fitrakis will join us at some point. Bob will hopefully identify himself when he comes on. So go ahead, Joe DEMARE.
Yeah, I think that a point that is kind of getting missed here is that he has said that you can't indict a sitting president. But the thing is, the only reason he's president is because of the misconduct that Mueller discovered in his investigation. And so it's kind of like saying, yes, we've got the evidence. We know that guy is a drug dealer and he sold like $1 million worth of drugs, but we're going to let him spend all the money and, first, and then we're going to go ahead and arrest him and indict him. So because Trump is enjoying the benefits of his breaking of the law, of his collusion. And so to say because he got away with it, we can't prosecute him, I think is a terrible piece of legal reasoning.
That's a good point.
It's I'm having trouble hearing you. But, I think this is a very important issue. I just think we should spend another minute on it. We have 545 elected representatives who write our laws and vote on them. In some countries, it may be, if you have a habit not to indict a sitting president, then eventually that becomes what they refer to as the common law. But in the United States, there is no such thing as common law. And the Constitution is very specific about that. So the constantly repeated rule that you have to wait until the president is out of office to indict him for a crime, no matter how guilty it is a lie, and that is unlawful, plain and simple. It's just a bold-faced, insulting lie being laid on the people without a backward glance. And everybody keeps repeating it like they were simply saying the earth is round, and we should simply accept it. And I think we accept things. I mean, that's one of the problems of this administration. We accept far too much without really investigating it.
Well, we also have no opposition party. I mean, you would think that if the Democratic Party was actually an opposition party, as opposed to a corporate lapdog, that they would be doing this. They would be taking this up. I mean, the real question I want to ask is, if Nancy Pelosi is so smart, how did Trump get in the White House? We've had a situation here where the Democrats have actually won every presidential election since 1992. They won in 2000 with the popular vote. They won in 2004 if John Kerry had done anything to protect the vote in Ohio. And they won in 2008 and 12 with Obama, and then they won again in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. Not my favorite person, but nonetheless, she won. Right. And have we heard yet from Hillary Clinton a single word about abolishing the Electoral College, or from Al Gore, or from John Kerry? Have any of these people said anything about changing the system that deprived them of the presidencies that they won?
Well, that we haven't heard a word about a lot of things. For example, the Democrats know, and I think if you look it up online, it's right there to be seen, that Rex Tillerson, who was a former head of a CEO of ExxonMobil, became the Secretary of State. He was the first Secretary of State, as you remember, under Trump. And he had a deal with Putin before, any kind of deal with Trump, like in 2012 and 2013, for them to drill for oil around the Dead Sea, and they both stood to make $500 billion profit on the deal as individuals. That would have made Putin the richest man in the world. But they were stopped from doing it because Obama placed sanctions on Russia in 2012 or something for invading the Ukraine. That was the excuse. And our law says that you can't make deals with foreign countries without our government's approval. So Putin and Tillerson decided they needed a president who would let the deal go through. And then they said, Tillerson said, I know just the guy, Donald Trump. And so a deal was cut so that Donald Trump was part of it. And that's how that romance with that threesome developed. Then Tillerson got the job as Secretary of State with Trump. He learned that Trump was so much of an idiot that even for him, he couldn't bear it, and he resigned. But if they're really looking for illegal monetary deals made by our president and Russia, there it all is. It was hot news 2 years ago. And it's always been there. And the truth is they don't want to get rid of Trump. That's the truth.
Oh, no. I mean, why would they? Well, I mean, I've told this story before, and I keep telling it to make sure that everybody's heard it. I've had both David K. Johnston and Greg Unger on my show. I've yet to have Steve Bannon, but I think it's important that we go through and we remember who Donald Trump is and what his relationship is with Vladimir Putin. Let's start. Donald Trump's grandfather ran a bordello in California. That is a mafia operation. Prostitution is one of the mainstays of the mob, and Donald Trump's grandfather was smack in the middle of it. His father, Fred Trump, was a slumlord in New York City. And you're not a slumlord in New York City without the five families. You cannot pour concrete in New York City without the mob. And Donald Trump's father was a mobster. Was he a made man? I don't know. But he was certainly doing business with the five families. He couldn't have done what he did without the five families. And Donald Trump grew up in a mob house. And his mentor, his beloved whatever, Roy Cohn, and his lawyer was, in fact, a mob lawyer. Everybody knows that. No discussion of it. Donald Trump inherited his father's real estate empire, such as it was. And having no business ability, he ran it into the ground. He wound up with billions of dollars in debt and multiple bankruptcies. And how did he get out of that? Well, simultaneously in the 1980s, the Soviet Union fell. Now, all that comes, by the way, from David K. Johnston, who's been following Trump since childhood. And we're going to, his book, one of his books with a great title is It's Even Worse Than You Think. And I've met David K. Johnston, and he's quite a guy, and his books are completely credible. The other side of the story, which comes from Craig Unker's House of Trump, House of Putin, is that in the 1980s and 90s, as the Soviet Union was falling, and the Gulag opened up, all these young mobsters came out of the Gulag. They set up their familias, although I don't know what this must be a Russian word, in the Gulag, and they came out ready for bear, and they divided up the Soviet Union as it was falling in the 80s, and then in 1991, in comes Boris Yeltsin, who was put in power by the CIA. He was just a drunken buffoon. The mobsters made themselves billionaires on his watch, and they divided up the Soviet Union, had billions of rubles. They wanted to integrate that money into the American real estate and financial markets, and who was the perfect guy? Donald Trump. Billions of dollars in debt, multiple bankruptcies, but tons of real estate. And Donald Trump laundered their money in the 1980s and 90s. In comes Vladimir Putin on December 31st, 1999. My, I don't know what it was, 45th birthday. And he takes over, and he assumes power over most or all of the billionaires in the former Soviet Union in Russia. They already own Donald Trump, and I guarantee you that Vladimir Putin has every piece of paper on every one of those crooked deals that Donald Trump did to pull himself out of bankruptcy. So there's two books. And, the Democrats, I mean, how can they not know this? How can they not deal with this? This is not like a random encounter with Vladimir Putin, who is infinitely smarter than Donald Trump. I mean, having Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in the same room is like mice and men. It's ridiculous. Putin is a very tough, very well-educated very smart guy. And he's got Donald Trump, totally around his finger. How the Democrats could not deal with this and not present these facts is absolutely beyond me. It's like there's some random, like Putin and Trump met randomly on the street. I mean, no. Putin knows everything about Donald Trump, every piece of his finances. He owns Donald Trump outright. And why this has not come up is a black mark on Nancy Pelosi and Schumer and all these other spineless, worthless corporate Democrats. Don't you agree,
One
Lila
of the
Garrett?
problems, I don't want to interrupt you, but look, you're pointing out that there's a problem within the opposition being the Democratic Party, presumably. At the end, there is no such thing as the Democratic Party. That's the problem. If we had a parliamentary system, the Democratic Party would not be one party. It would be at least three parties, and possibly as many as five. Other countries, England, France, Spain, Italy, they all have minor parties. And those parties are credible, and they make a difference. And they very often swing the vote. We don't have that. We have too many rules from too many different states about starting a new party. In some states, we need millions of signatures. In other states, we need nothing. But the bottom line is we cannot get it organized. And so the Democratic Party is run, again, by its money section, by the section of the party that's locked into corporations. That's Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. I mean, They are the ones that really believe in not antagonizing the fossil fuel industry. They're the ones that don't want to antagonize too much the nuclear industry. They get big money from these people. If you look for Kamala Harris, for example, who was one of her biggest contributors? Mnuchin, that monster who was the Secretary of the Treasury under Trump. He is the one who helped her get elected as Attorney General in California, and he is right behind her in this election. So the fact that you have to play that kind of ball to get ahead in our system is very defeating. What do you do about that?
Joe DeMare, you got a word on that one?
Well,
I mean, you have to have
as
public
the political director of the Ohio
That's
Green
why
Party,
my show is called
and
because
a
all
party
of these
which
things are
lost
connected.
its party status in the last November's election because of a change in the rules that said we had to get 3% of the vote instead of 1% of the vote. I agree that the deck is definitely, both parties cooperate to make sure no third parties get any traction. But what we have to do is just keep building our parties anyway, even though we've lost the status, because, when they took our party status away from us, we were approximately 10 times bigger than we were when we got the status. We had more than double the number of active county organizations. We had a record.
Joe, you're talking about the Green Party in Ohio, and Lila made the point, a very good point, that we can't build a third party. We haven't been able to in this country. You're telling us what happened in Ohio, and please do proceed. It was a little hard to hear you at the first, but what has happened with the Ohio Green Party? It's very important to know.
Well, basically, I was just supporting what she said, in that the deck is stacked against the third parties, because by every measure we were more of a party and in better position and bigger and stronger than we were when we got party status, when they took it away from us. So, but we are continuing to have an impact. I mean, our presence does make a difference. So we're not giving up. We're not going away. So I'm not sure exactly what the solution is, but I know
really
that isn't the solution. Giving up on
I can hardly
third-party
hear
politics is not the solution.
Can you make your other guest a little louder? Because he sounds like he's saying some very interesting things.
Yes, well, he's talking about the Green Party in Ohio, and that the Green Party was very successful building its base and moving up, and then, of course, the two parties, the Democrats and Republicans, moved in and really undercut the Green Party here.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that in a minute as we talk about trying to reverse this horrendous bailout that they have done here in Ohio, or trying to do for the nuclear power plants. But let me go back to Lila, what you were saying, and Joe, if you're listening, of course. The bottom line here is that, as far as I can tell, as far as I'm concerned, the only way that Trump is going to be defeated in 2020 is with the millennials. You know, the corporate Democrats, and this is totally predictable, and this is what they always do, and they have been doing since, dare I get into it, 1920, or 1918, when Woodrow Wilson destroyed illegally the Socialist Party in this country. We did have a Socialist Party. It was very, very popular. They had a great leader, Eugene V. Debs, was getting millions of votes and winning offices all over the country. And in order to kill the Socialist Party, which would be equivalent to the Green Party now, they basically went into World War I, which was utterly ridiculous, and used that as a cover to physically, illegally, unconstitutionally destroy the Socialist Party of America. Right. And to put Eugene V. Debs in jail for 3 years on ridiculous, trumped-up charges based on his speech he gave. Nothing. Eugene Debs was basically a nonviolent guy, and we haven't had a viable threat, third party, since the destruction of the Socialist Party 100 years ago. Now, this upcoming election, these Democrats are talking about how they have to be credible and you can't go too far left and blah, blah, blah. The bottom line is, as far as I can tell, everybody over 30 in this country has decided who they're going to vote for. There's no middle ground here. A little over 50% of the public is going to vote against Donald Trump. A little under 50% is going to vote for Donald Trump. But the way the Electoral College stacks up, the Republicans will steal the election. They know exactly how to do it. I'm guaranteeing you that in the Kremlin right now, there are very sophisticated war rooms where they know the names, phone numbers, and addresses of the precinct captains in the 3,000 precincts that we have in this country. They're more than happy to go in there and do exactly what they need to do in the swing states in 2020. That will happen. The only way that Trump will be defeated in 2020 is with a massive turnout by the millennials, who are overwhelmingly anti-Trump. They're actually evenly divided, more or less, on capitalism versus socialism.
Right.
We have 40 million people in this country with student debt, for God's sakes. And, obviously most of them are millennials. And the corporate Democrats will never get off their behind and appeal to these people because they're owned by the corporation. And, of course, Nancy Pelosi comes out and attacks the only people who are capable of getting rid of Donald Trump, which is the millennials. When she attacked these 4 women in the Congress, yes, they were women of color. Yes, they were women. Yes, they're progressive. But the important thing about them is that they're young, and they represent the millennial generation. And so here we have Nancy Pelosi going out of her way to attack they don't have just 4 votes. They have 85 million votes. And, she goes out of her way to attack the very people that are the only people that can win the election in 2020. Let me ask Lila and then Joe to comment on that, please. Lila, what do you think?
Well, I think that we have to take a look at language. I agree with everything you just said. And the minute you use the word, for example, socialist, it's a hot-button word in this country. And the use of the right wing when it comes to language is infinitely superior to the use of the progressive people in this country. They understand the meaning of language. I remember when they used to call one of the missiles, the peace missile. They attached the word the MS missile. I remember that.
Yeah.
They used to call it the peacemaker. And you can really describe anything to the average American by using these hot-button words. I mean, socialism actually means, and of course your listeners know this, a great belief in social programs. They believe that people pay taxes to have protection, to have coverage for their children, health care, to have, you know the list, to have education, to have peace, to have war, to have clothing, to have shelter. And people in Sweden and in Denmark and Norway pay practically half of their salaries, half of their money in taxes, because they don't look at taxes the way we do, where most of our, with 70 cents of every single dollar goes to making arms. They don't look at it that way because that's not what's happening. What they have is a partnership with their government where they are hiring the government to serve them. And as a result, they're able to function. There's much more equality, and they have socialist governments. But when you say socialist in this country, people think of the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union, we have to face this, Harvey, was a dictatorship. It was very, very unpleasant. The poor people of Russia have never had a decent government as far as I can remember. And my ancestry comes from Russia, and as far as they could remember when I knew them, they just never had anything but a totalitarian government. Maybe it's the weather, I don't know. But in any case, I think we have to re-educate the people in this country and make them understand that what we're trying to accomplish, when they say that they are democratic socialists, they are saying you pay your taxes for certain services, and you should get those services. And we want to give them to you, and you should insist on them. How do you feel about language?
Yes, and I want to point out something, and then we'll go to Joe. We actually are a socialist country, and Donald Trump is a socialist, and we have just seen socialism in Ohio. It's national socialism, exactly what Hitler advocated, which is socialism for the rich and the corporation.
Well, don't use the word socialist. It's a fascist country. I mean, there's a new organization now. They were on my show. I wanted to tell you people about them. They're called Refuse Fascism, and they do very brave things like people do when they're starting a movement. They go down into the highways and the freeways, and they hold signs, and they get hit by cars and arrested by cops who say they're obstructing justice and so on. But they're starting to win some battles here, and they say it like it is. Refuse fascism. I don't consider these countries that have strong social programs to be social countries which basically are undemocratic. I don't think of Trump as a socialist. Do you?
Yes, he's a national socialist.
That's no such thing. He is a fascist.
Of course there is. The term National Socialism was coined by Theodore Roosevelt and used by Hitler to justify
because
the takeover of the state.
Our language and they distort it. That's what's happening. So we have to decide: do we protect our language, or do we say, "Okay, have it your way"?
Bob Fitrakis, have you come on the line yet?
Yeah, I'm on, Harvey, if you can hear me.
Oh, Bob. All right, so let's talk to Bob here about this. Lila, Garrett, you're with us. It's wonderful. And Bob, you are an expert in American socialism. You have written some of the great things, and we're now going to segue from you into this socialism in Ohio perpetrated by the corporations. But what do you feel about, isn't it basically democratic socialism or social democracy versus national socialism or corporate fascism? Isn't that a reasonable way to frame the discussion and the language?
except I think one of the points that was made by your guest was that they used the term socialism because it was so popular. So the real axis is whether or not you practice democratic socialism or undemocratic socialism, democratic capitalism, undemocratic capitalism. And the right, which you're right, the Nazis are National Socialists. Really, that's fascism. That's undemocratic corporate capitalism. It's authoritarian, and the undemocratic socialists, were Marxist-Leninists. So, to the extent that Trump, Trump said some very nice things and was praised by Andrew Anglin of the Stormer, the major neo-Nazi site, when he attacked the 4 young Congress women. He was praised by one of the country's leading neo-Nazis. And again, when he said there were good people, on both sides after Charlottesville, that was clearly absurd. But I think the battle is really one of whether you believe in democracy or whether you believe in some undemocratic form of government, and that on the right is in fact fascism and Nazism. And the other issues over there, it's a lot of that's crony capitalism as well. So in a sense, they believe in socialism for the rich, socialism for themselves.
Can I jump in here?
To get involved in these kinds of details. I think that if you're taking a master class and you're analyzing, language and so on, it's delicious and wonderful.
Yeah, hold on one
second. A lot of fun and all that. But I really think like it's a person in advertising, I have to tell you. Your language, I believe our language has to be very clear. I believe that, if we're going to own socialism, then we have to explain how different it is from communism and from fascism, because socialism implies the purest kind of democracy, the purest kind. It's where the people we elect work for us. We do not work for them. I know Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I loved many things about Kennedy, but that was just one of those, poetic things that people say without really thinking.
Okay, very good. So let's talk now with Joe DeMare. Bob and I, the three of us, Bob, Joe, and I, are all in Ohio, and California is being represented beautifully by Lila Garrett. We want to talk now about what has just happened in Ohio. We're on this discussion of socialism versus capitalism, democracy versus fascism, and it's really corporatism that it's the problem. The corporations running the country. And Joe DeMare, we have just had an example that couldn't be more gratuitous or grotesque of corporations running the country. Tell us what has happened with the Ohio legislature and our nuclear plants and what we think we might be able to do about it.
Okay, well, this ties in perfectly with the discussion up till now, because the people of Ohio, I'll back up a step here. What just passed in Ohio, House Bill 6, is a bill that bails out Ohio's nuclear power plants. We have 2 nuclear power plants. It adds a charge to everyone's bill because they're unprofitable. They cannot compete with the other energy sources. And in the horrible process that led up to this bill, American Electric Power, which owns some coal plants, said, hey, we want in on this too. So now this bill, which is called the Ohio Clean Air Legislation, bails out 2 nuclear plants and 2 coal plants. It does not give anything to wind. It gives something to 5 specific solar fields, but no more. And it was opposed by 3/4 of Ohioans. The polls were all saying that 75% plus of Ohioans did not want House Bill 6 to pass. And yet it went ahead and passed 51-38 in the House this past week. And then the Governor DeWine was almost literally standing outside the door with a pen. He signed it within an hour or two of it being passed. And it is the perfect example of corporate control of the government, as you said, Harvey. It all started way back in the 2018 primaries when First Energy handpicked 12 Republicans to win the primary vote in order to put this ballot measure into legislation. And 11 out of their 12 won. They unseated incumbent Republicans. And just every step of the way, this has been They spent over $9 million advertising this to the people of Ohio, trying to convince them it's a good thing. But the people of Ohio didn't buy it. They still oppose it, and yet it passed.
And what exactly does it do, Joe? Tell us exactly what this bailout does. It's outrageous.
Okay, well, Ohio has had, like many other states, it has had some charges that they add to people's bills. That part of that charge goes to energy efficiency programs, so it helps people buy energy-efficient light bulbs and insulate their houses. And part of that charge has gone to a renewable portfolio standard. That is, that the state of Ohio set a goal that we would have over 12% of our energy come from renewable sources like wind and sun. And that was put in place as a bipartisan program. It's been working well. It's created over 100,000 jobs and saved over $5 billion in energy costs through the efficiency program. And what this bill does is it eliminates those two programs. It eliminates the energy efficiency right away, and then the renewable portfolio standard, it first slashes down to 8%, and then it gets rid of it after 2026. And then it adds new charges on everyone's bills. 85 cents then goes to the nuclear power plants, our two nuclear plants, which are both leaking and cracking and just terrible messes, which should have been shut down years ago. And also it adds charges to everyone's bills to go to support these two coal plants, one of which is actually in Indiana. So Ohioans are going to be charged money on their electric bills to pay for an Indiana coal plant, which, by the way, is one of the dirtiest in the country, and it pollutes the air of both Dayton, Ohio, and Cincinnati, Ohio. So we're being taxed in order to buy the pollution that's actually coming back and killing us through respiratory disease and asthma. And it's just amazing.
It is outrageous. Bob Fitrakis, you're in Central Ohio. You've been with the Green Party. What do you think we can do about this outrageous theft of Ohio's finances and ecological future?
Well, I think the good news is it took them so long to pass it. They bought their legislators. They had everything lined up. They were trying to sell it as saving jobs, not bailing out the nuclear industry. And virtually everyone in the state, except First Energy, was opposed to it. You had the manufacturers, the chamber people, the oil and gas industry, the environmentalists and Greens. Is that because of that, I think the only thing to do, Harvey, is to move forward with a referendum to repeal, this massive bailout, this socialism for the rich, this crony capitalism where they're handing out $1 billion. I think the people of Ohio should create a broad coalition and repeal this very dangerous, poisonous source of energy.
Well, it's outrageous, and the question now is, how do we do this? Among other things, it appears that the oil and gas industry might step in here and fund a referendum. I think you know more about this than anybody, Joe. And what do we do in the environmental movement if the Koch brothers, of all people, come in and fund a referendum to overturn this outrageous National Socialist handout from the legislature?
Well, I'm still investigating, still finding out the details of what's going on with that. What we know for sure is that a company called Stop Corporate Bailouts was formed hours after the law passed the House, and we know that it's at least partially funded by a fellow who's a millionaire out of Boston who owns a company called Clean Energy that does natural gas-fired power plants, and that their stated purpose is to put a referendum on the ballot to repeal House Bill 6. We don't know who else is behind this. We don't know what other groups might be in this. They say they've got a coalition already set up, and I'm still trying to track down who exactly is in this coalition. But the key question is, will they do a repeal, which is a straight 100% repeal, as in just go right back to the programs that we had with renewables and with energy efficiency, and not fund the bailouts for either the coal or the nukes? Or are they going to do something that's like not quite a full bailout? So a lot of organizations are kind of looking at it and waiting to see what gets proposed. It's looking like the information I have so far is they are also talking about just a full repeal, just a straightforward House Bill 6 is hereby negated, which would be the simplest and probably the most foolproof way to do it. But I can't definitively say that that's what they're going to do yet, or if they're going to be the only ones organizing a referendum. So, but that's where it is right now.
We'll talk about strange bedfellows. Bob Fitrakis with us on the air, and I, in 2004, broke most of the major stories about the theft of the 2004 election, and it was perpetrated by J. Kenneth Blackwell, the Secretary of State at the time, and he has now turned up in the opposition to House Bill 6. Isn't that right, Bob? And do we have a photo of you and me with Ken Blackwell yet?
No, we do have a cover of the Free Press where he's in jail, that he signed it for somebody and wrote "free at last." But so yes, one of the most corrupt men in Ohio politics is now on our side, right? He's working for kind of a libertarian, anti-tax think tank, and realizes that, this is a bailout. This is, one of the largest welfare checks ever written in the history of the United States. So the huge recipient of welfare, is this corrupt company that mainly wants it for bonuses for their executives.
It's outrageous. Well, Lila, Garrett, you and I, in California, are facing the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. And Diablo Canyon is surrounded by earthquake faults. It's at San Luis Obispo, really, at Avila Beach. And within the last couple of weeks, there was a 7.1 earthquake less than 200 miles from Diablo Canyon. And you have signed a petition along with Mimi Kennedy, Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, Martin Sheen, Eric Roberts, Ed Begley, Francis Fisher, Jody Evans. Just Graham Nash, an incredible list of great celebrities asking the governor of California, the so-called liberal governor of California, Gavin Newsom, to go in and inspect Diablo Canyon. And he has done absolutely nothing. In fact, he hasn't even responded to the petition. What are we going to do about that?
We've been asking ourselves that question for some time. It is amazing how people like you, Harvey, who are leaders in this field of not letting us all blow up, because of over nuclear development, how well you've managed to protect us. But I just get the feeling that every single time there is a new technology, we find ourselves warning people about that technology, And sometimes, it turns back on itself. People feel they need. We say no fossil fuels. That's no good. And we say, no drones. That's no good. And now we say nuclear energy. We know that's no good. So my question is, and I know it's an annoying question, but I'm starting to wonder about it. What have we got to offer that is good? I mean, we have to offer an alternative. I think perhaps I'll finish just a sentence. I feel perhaps sun and wind and all of that, which is very, very strong and wonderful, sounds more romantic and poetic than practical. So that
well, actually, yes, you're right about that. And one thing that's devastating and wind and solar have just absolutely blown through all technological barriers. I mean, one of the great miracles of our lifetime is the incredible rise and success of wind and solar technologies in their technological advancement, and we're now being joined by battery technology and by LED efficiency. LED lighting is astounding how successful and efficient and cheap it's become. I mean, these four technologies, wind, solar, batteries, and LED efficiency, have just blown through all the technological and financial barriers. One of the most amazing things about what's happened in Ohio, and Joe, maybe you're best suited to comment on this, is the effectiveness of the fossil nuclear industry in keeping wind energy out of Ohio. With a single sentence in the Ohio Code, the setback clause is absolutely astounding. And by the way, we're about to run out of time, so I want to make sure, Lila Garrett, you are the host of the great Connect the Dots radio show on KPFK. It should be a national show. You are a national treasure. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, you can email me, Lila F. Garrett, LILA, F as in Francis, Garrett, GARRETT, @gmail.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me. But you can also call. You can go to kpfk.org on your computer and go from there to archives. And my show is on every show that I do. I do one a week, but every one of them is on for 6 weeks. So in that sense, that they are podcasts. So let me say that again: kpfk.org, and go to archives, and go to Connect the Dots after that, or Lila Garrett, and you can listen to my show. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Bob Fitrakis, people can get a hold of you, how?
Freepress.org, and I would also invite people this Saturday, I believe it's at 4, I'll be doing a Reddit session where you can ask me anything, and the topic is Jeffrey Epstein, who I spent a lot of time reporting on, but really his connections to the intelligence community.
Oh, okay. And finally, and Joe, I'm going to give it to you. I want you to tell people how to get a hold of you, and tell us then, and we'll probably go out on this, on what they've done to prevent wind power from coming into Ohio.
All right. Well, I also have a podcast and a YouTube channel because I have a radio show here in Toledo, Ohio called For a Green Future. So if you just search your podcast or YouTube for a Green Future, you can find me there. Also on Facebook. And I want to first tie in Donald Trump's story with this nuclear story because two things happened. One, Donald Trump weighed in on House Bill 1 through his campaign manager in Ohio. He wanted House Bill 6 to pass, and he told Republican legislators that through his proxy in no uncertain terms. And the hour that after it passed, the U.S. Department of Energy put out a tweet praising Ohio for wisely investing in nuclear power into the future. So you know, those dirty fingerprints are all over this bill. And so the setback law, which was passed in 2014, says that you have to have your wind turbines more than 1,500 feet away from the nearest property line, which means that you have to own at least a half-mile square property to have a utility-scale wind turbine. And then if you owned something a half-mile square, you could only put one turbine in the middle. It effectively ended, there were billions of dollars, estimates are $4 billion, in planned wind farms in the state of Ohio, and they were all shot down by this law. And then, ironically, in the hearings for House Bill 6, one of the arguments made for keeping the nuclear plants is that we don't have enough wind. And so, they outlawed wind in 2014.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. You got it. You nailed it. Thank you so much, Bob Fitrakis, Lila Garrett. We'll see you next week in Solartopia. Thanks to the crew in New York. And let's prevent fascism. We're down to the wire here. No nukes, everybody.
We're gonna have a Solartopia, Solartopia, Solartopia. Don't you know we're gonna have a Solartopia?